The dead have walked again, and based off the first 2 episodes, I'm fucking glad of it.
It's good to have you back, Spider-Man.
The show has managed to shake the rigor mortis and find life in its concept once more, and this feeling might stem from the senseless drivel that's been put out to us over the past year or so, but right now at least this series has everything going for it. I think it was pretty much a unanimous feeling among the fandom that by the end of the flagship series, it was about time for it to rest in peace and fucking stay that way. But with the announcements of the 3 spin-offs set to focus on Negan and Maggie, Rick and Michonne and Daryl Dixon undergoing further development to their characters as they close out on their respective chapters in a more intimate way for fans, felt deserving but also did nothing to aid the feeling that they were exhaustive attempts at keeping a tedious franchise going.
Why won't you die?
However, I think it was worth kicking the dead horse just a little longer to witness an uneasy alliance between the show's biggest chip on its shoulder and possibly its best written redemption story unite for a desperate situation packed with nuance that brings about history once more in a deadly way on the ashes of one location relating to the virus's origins.
Good job.
Negan and Maggie have a blood feud that should have transcended what we witnessed play out following our sociopathic arsehole's debut, but instead what we got was the equivalent of trying to light your own fart only to push too hard and follow through. But it would seem that the writers understood what they missed out on and now seek to make up for that in spades here. However, the conflicting aspect of the creative choice with the show is we needed everything to happen as it did to light the fire under this delightful cacophony of character agency and purposeful choices that operate on another level compared to what we saw in the main series. And I'll admit though, the announcement of the spin-off did destroy the believability of any threat made towards the pair as they were closing out on the flagship show, as you knew they'd live beyond the parameters of what we saw play out. And given how things concluded in the unending manner that it did, the question came about, was the show actually necessary to offer the closure for our clashing champions? And given what I've seen, it absolutely was.
Oh, thank goodness.
However, I won't lie, I was hesitant heading into this that the writing would have devolved into a state reserved for Star Wars and Marvel at this point, with concerns over personal agendas and political insertions taking priority over characters and plot.
Am I so out of touch? No, it's the children who are wrong.
Thankfully though, this show seems to be on top form once again, and foregoing the nauseating pandering that comprised the likes of Resident Evil, She-Hulk and Velma, it's still centred on the consequences of our protagonists' actions, previous dealings and personal grievances all coming to a boiling point in a genuinely tense and unforgiving way. As our intrepid heroes begin to traverse a new metropolitan dystopia, being met with new harsh conditions of the world around them, the ceaseless brutality of the walkers, and the compromised morality of human society. So grab your revolver, your Stetson, and hop on board as we dive back into the world of the Walking Dead.
Well, this stinks.
We return to the ravished hellscape of infested wastelands by gazing upon Manhattan from the perspective of Maggie, who is seen visibly distraught. She manages to avoid detection from a nearby herd, but is confronted by a lone walker that she eviscerates with visible panic and frustration in her eyes.
They're there.
After the intro, we follow Maggie making her way back to a nearby outpost of wanderers, searching for answers regarding someone who has an experience with walkers and has been earning refuge with them in return for his support. Maggie almost discovers the target in question when she's pulled back and interrogated for her actions, but manages to do a lioness move by revealing a defensive dagger embedded in her boot to break away, and goes on a chase for the person she was tracking, revealed to be Negan. Once they're settled, Maggie explains that she's been in search of support for a few weeks as Hilltop was attacked strategically and without warning, in a similar manner to how Negan used to conduct his own raids. Now being led by a former saviour named the Croat, who's taken her son Herschel as collateral.
Well, that's fucking not good.
Negan explains in the next episode that the Croat was always a rather eccentric and sadistic motherfucker, and after committing a heinous crime that went against Negan's commands, he was banished from the Saviours and never to be heard from until now. Negan asks that if they do this, Maggie offer refuge to a young girl he's with named Ginny, who lost her parents a little while back and Negan is taken under his wing for protection. Maggie agrees to this and says that they'll consider Negan's existence among the group depending on how things turn out with this mission, but makes him aware that he's being hunted by a new authoritarian division named the New Babylon Federation, explaining how she managed to find him.
It all makes sense now.
We shift briefly to one of the antagonists for the show, however, and I could swear is Jamie Foxx's younger brother, Perlie Armstrong, a marshal for the New Babylon Federation who's been tasked with tracking down Negan for the death of a magistrate and 4 other marshals, which Negan later explains things aren't as they seem. Perlie questions the patrons in the bar, and specifically their leader Jones, who denies any knowledge of Negan's involvement among them, until Armstrong throws her to the walkers as a means of getting her talking. She then confesses everything, including providing Negan shelter for his aid with the walkers, to which Perlie claims is aiding and abetting, so kills her anyway by passing her over to be devoured.
That's a little fucked up, no?
Oh, it's super fucked up.
And as we're about to move back to Negan and Maggie, Perlie finds a map book that Maggie dropped earlier and determines where they are headed, and as they manage to catch up with them, we get a brief bit of dialogue explaining that Manhattan was one of the locations the virus emanated from.
This is not my arm.
And as he sends his men out to scout the area, Negan grabs one of the men named Jano, and they use him as a human shield against being taken out as they make their escape over the oceans. And after an incredible sparring match between Maggie and Negan taking place on the boat over their shared bloodshed at this point, they arrive in Manhattan and are quickly greeted by walkers, learning to do the flop.
Everybody do the flop!
Which starts to arouse suspicion from other pods of walkers hidden among the city, and Jano tries to compromise our protagonists to escape, but Negan keeps them close and they're forced to run for now. As they hit an impasse in the city, a truck veers by carrying music as a luring method for a large horde behind them, who the gang tried to hide from but are caught off by an infestation of cockroaches, forcing them out of cover. With Perlie and Grits quickly behind them, making the gang retreat into a nearby laundromat, the fight spills over inside, and the walkers begin flooding the building, taking out Grits. Perlie shoots Jano in an attempt to kill Negan, and then he goes toe-to-toe with Maggie, coming up short against her, weaponizing Glenn's wedding ring, to which she knocks him out with. And as the pair continue deeper into the building, Negan lights a match for visibility, to which they're greeted by an elderly lady who blows it out. And as we close on this episode, we get the reveal of the Croat himself, who's preparing to torture an aged-up Herschel for answers regarding Negan's whereabouts, and is informed of a prisoner escaping who we see as a heavily marred man that manages to reach a zipline, but as he descends to the next building, the Croat severs the line, dropping him 20 stories to his death. Well, it's been a while, but damn does it feel good to see The Walking Dead return on top form once again. With how Season 11 concluded, it's fair to say that had there been no announcements or open-ended resolutions, many would have been fine with it just ending. But as I said in the intro, this makes me glad that we got more. The level of production quality is second to none when it comes to this franchise, and the cinematic camera work helps to immerse you and center your focus on what you're being informed of. The screenplay is concise, intelligent, and purposeful without a shred of restraint to recall upon the grueling moments that cemented these two as intrinsically linked enemies to themselves as much as each other. And the dynamic between a woman desperate to retrieve her son that she'll stoop to asking the murderer of her husband to help out greatly enhances the tension and allows for hopefully a cathartic payoff to both their journeys, with either an altruistic sacrifice from Negan or a possible sign of mutual respect from Maggie, unless they become involved in the possible rise against the CRM. This pairing was possibly the one I wanted to see the most from in these assortments of spin-offs, as there's so much agency, turmoil and trauma between the pair, with their history bleeding over the pages of this chapter, and providing us with a deeper understanding of how they've become one and the same somewhat, whilst brilliantly acknowledging the differences between them. Negan has become this hardened wanderer, having to live with the pain of his actions against others like Rick wanted, whilst trying to convince the world that he's turning over a new leaf, and despite his support during the Whisper and Commonwealth Wars, he can never assure them of his well intent, so he continually reverts to a smug, sociopathic attitude to protect himself, aware of why he'll never be trusted again. And Maggie has become this judgmental, overbearing mother who's incapable of trust and maintaining a community, even becoming wary of her own friends for a while upon her return in Season 10, who sought out a safer existence. And for that feeling she equated to as being weakness if they couldn't do it for themselves, which admittedly served her well against the Commonwealth. And given the transgression he committed against her personally, she'll probably never be able to accept Negan's existence, but the complexity to the relationship here is what he has done for her and for Herschel and Judith and everyone else back home, which many interpreted as self-serving, but we as the audience all know was done to protect the world he'll never be a part of.
Knock knock! Who's there? That door!
This is possibly one of my favourite on-screen pairings in recent memory, and assuming this won't be a limited series, I'm happy to see it run a course for another season or two. The charm and personality has never left Jeffrey Dean, who looking back now seemed ready to step away from the role, but thankfully he appears to be ready to see Negan's journey out to a written conclusion. And personally, as long as we continue to get the charismatic connoisseur of comedy laced with a little violence, you can take my fucking money. And as we know, Lauren Cohen is the first name on the card, but whenever Jeffrey Dean's around, you've got no fucking chance of taking the spotlight. So good luck to the cast and the boys. However, for what it's worth though, Lauren carries the role like slipping on an old glove at this point, and is a far cry from how we started with Maggie. They both have something to offer here, and the chemistry between both the actors and the characters is almost unheard of. I'm sat either smirking or shaking whenever they have an interaction with one another, as you just know at any point, one of them could pull the trigger, but they equally can't do this without the other.
Rise and shine, Stubby. Wake up! Up and at 'em. Fine then.
This feels perfectly crafted despite all the busy work done throughout seasons 7 and 8 of the main show, and honestly, having watched episode 2 already, I'm grateful as it means we can just kick back and watch them both flex, understanding what they stand for and what their intentions are. I'll likely discuss these two at greater length as the season progresses, but my god is this already proven to be a contender for one of the best shows of the year, solely off Negan and Maggie's tenuous relationship playing out from a simple plot and extensive work done to fill out the lore. And as for every other component that comprises this excellently designed graphic cornucopia, there's a lot to appreciate here and aspects I'd love to learn more on. Beginning with Perlie, a fascinating addition to the series as this straight-shooting, no-shit, respectable man who wishes to avenge his fallen allies, and someone who has a moral code and wants to orchestrate order in a time of chaos to regain some semblance of meaning and structure to human society once again.
I'm a cop, and you will respect my authority!
He carries himself with an air of intrigue and calm that leaves his victims and colleagues unsettled about his mindset and next move, shown with the shock on Jano's face after feeding Jones to the walkers for her transgressions without so much as a second thought, and then he calmly explains that it wasn't what he wanted to do, but the rules were broken so the punishment needed to stick. However, as we'll come to see in the next episode though, we shouldn't take this sentiment as insincere, given the lengths he went to locate a deceased family member and how he offers personal information regarding his wife and children to try and coerce Maggie into talking. As it is currently, I don't see him strictly one side or the other. He's riding a line of moral ambiguity that could shift depending on how things transpire from the next installment, but I think he's one to watch out for, especially with the threat of the Croat overhead. A character of which offers a sense of familiarity when it comes to the threat when you remember what the Saviours were capable of under Negan's instruction. But now the reins are off and the Croat runs the show, with a desire for control, and has clearly been monitoring Negan's whereabouts for some time, and must have known about his connection to Herschel and the people of Hilltop for him to be willing to question the young man so directly by the end. It leads me to believe that the Croat has influence over Waters as well, maybe even a hand in the New Babylon Federation, and possibly might have tasked Perlie and the others with tracking Negan down. Understanding what Negan was capable of in the past, and if he's been aware of his existence this far in, then I would assume that he knows of Negan's involvement in the Whisper and Commonwealth Wars and still deems him a threat. It'll be interesting to uncover how he came to find out about Herschel's connection to him, but if it doesn't come out with any logical consistency or reasoning, then let's just assume plot convenience. But that little nugget of curiosity aside, I think the delivery of the Croat was decent. He's menacing, sadistic and apathetic, with the actions designed to establish him as the kingpin. So my final thoughts regarding this episode is that it's a solid reintroduction to this world, with a concise focus on two of the biggest loose cannons to come from the franchise, with heaps of charged exposition, hefty progression to already stacked personalities, and some imaginative ways to utilise the natural dangers of the world at the age that it is, whilst incorporating man-made threats to everyone who dares step on a rooftop or out of a door. I can honestly say that after so long, The Walking Dead has returned to its former glory, with an understanding of interest from its audience, and even if it winds up being unconnected to the larger threat involved in the other shows, it was just a pleasure to see these two take the screen once more in a final stand against history incarnate. That's going to do it from me for this week though, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me. If you liked what you saw here and wish to support me, leave a like and subscribe for the rest of my coverage on Dead City. And until next time everyone, take care, and I'll see you soon.